top. Amen. I just put this on. This isn't on your playlist either.
Don't you think it's a little bit early for that?
Not for me.
Okay, well, that was Lester Bangs. This is Alice Wisdom, and here's Iggy Pop.
So you're the kid who's been sending me those articles from the school newspaper.
Yeah. I've been doing some stuff for a local underground paper also.
And what do you like, the star of your school?
They hate me.
Yeah. Well, you'll meet them all again on their long journey to the middle. You know, your writing is damn good. It's just a shame you missed out on rock and roll. It's over.
Over?
It's over. I mean, you got here just in time for the death rattle. Last gasp. Last grope.
At least I'm here for that.
Yeah, what do you type on?
Smith Corona Galaxis Deluxe.
Hey, you like Lou Reed?
The early stuff. In his new stuff, he's trying to be Bowie. He should just be himself.
Yeah, but if Bowie's doing Lou, and if Lou's doing Bowie, Lou's still doing Lou.
If you like Lou.
Take drugs?
No.
Smart kid.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Stuff We've Seen. This is Jim, and here he is, bravely podcasting for free during the government shutdown. It's Teal. How's that shutdown going for you, buddy?
Well, the show must go on.
We won't shut down the podcast.
No, we won't. We will keep going. We know that people out there are depending on us, and we won't let them down. Okay, so I saw Blade Runner 2049, and there are giant walls around Los Angeles to keep the water out. We need walls around our coastal cities to keep the water out from global warming. We don't need a wall on the southern border.
Yeah, so you saw that, and you saw it on your fantastic home movie setup, right?
I saw it on my fantastic home movie setup, big screen, just beautiful to look at. I like this director a lot. Ryan Gosling is pretty good. I don't know. I liked the movie a lot. I think it's probably one of the best science fiction films I've seen, at least in a decade.
I'm glad you said that, because I feel like just in the tradition of the first Blade Runner, in about 10 years from now, people are going to be praising this movie.
People will wake up to this movie. I was just stunned by it. I thought it was absolutely great. I had very few problems with it.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to pick apart that movie, I did have some issues with the story and felt that it would have been more successful had it not tried to be too Hollywood plot driven and kept it a little bit more simple and maybe a little bit shorter. Yet at the same time, every moment of its extreme length, I was like enraptured by some of the greatest visuals I've ever seen.
So was I. And the thing about the story is that had it been shorter, it would have felt like it was all plot. But because of the length, there's a lot of room for the actors to breathe. And ponder. And that opens it up a little bit so it doesn't feel like it's just Hollywood plot.
Well, plus, I mean, it's very rare for a movie to come out almost 30 years
40.
after... 40, oh my God, almost 40 years after the original, and yet with different technology. So this film was shot digitally, and you know how I have usually an issue with films that are shot digitally, but it is shot by the great Roger Deakins, and he is the exception to the rule.
Yes.
But it's so rare. You'd have a different director, you have a different cinematographer, I mean, different everything.
Yeah, different everything.
And yeah, and it's set almost 40 years in the future from its original 2019.
Yeah.
And yet it looks like it is exactly from the same world.
It is a sequel through and through. It feels like it's a continuation of that movie. It feels like a real sequel. And I got to hand it to the movie. A lot of science fiction films fall into the trap of being about the world, but this really, I felt like, was about the character. And the original Blade Runner 2, but it really felt like it was a philosophical exploration into what it means to be human. And that's what Philip K. Dick was going for with the original book. And I'm a big Philip K. Dick fan. And I think he would have loved this movie through and through.
Man, I'm glad that we're getting a chance to talk about it, because I was one of the few people that was such a fan that I wanted to see it in the theater when it first came out, and I did. And the original has now such a great reputation.
Yeah.
And so many fans that, I can understand why producers thought that this was going to be a blockbuster, yet that they also should have realized that it was not meant to be, because, even though I was just a kid, I saw the original Blade Runner in its first run in the theater. My dad took me. It was part of a sneak preview, because I saw it with another film first, and it was on second. And when I was just 12 years old when it came out, I thought it was terrible.
Oh, yeah.
It was boring. I thought it was supposed to be an action film, which is exactly what audiences thought. They thought,
yes,
Harrison Ford, Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's going to be great.
He's got a gun on the poster.
The weird thing was, it was a movie they didn't like, but like the great films, it stayed with me.
Yes.
I remembered images and just scenes, and there was just something that was going on beyond a movie. And when it first showed up on HBO, like a year later, my dad was watching it, and I got sucked in. And suddenly, having seen it once before, I was able to pay deeper attention to it and enjoyed it.
Yes.
And then it wasn't until a few years later, when I hit college, when I had discovered there was sort of a cult about it, where kids were talking about it and they would show it on campus, and everybody was going and being like, "Oh, Blade Runner's the best."
Yeah, people just fell in love with it over time. And it's not even a cult movie at this point. Its reputation has changed so much that it's now considered, people forget how panned it was.
Yeah, so I think, only time will tell, but the same thing could happen with this Blade Runner.
I think it will. I just thought this was an incredibly good science fiction film. And I when it was over, I thought, I want to watch that again.
That's it's awesome to hear.
Yeah, at 2 hours and 45 minutes, I didn't start it over right. But I got to say, I started it and I thought, I'm just going to watch a little bit of this tonight. And I was up till like 2 watching it.
Yeah, it's one of the very few Ultra 4K HD discs that I own.
Yeah, well, it's worth it.
Okay, so let's see. So you saw that. Then here's a film I saw that, this is funny because you hadn't seen it, but you recommended it. You said you had a copy, and I assumed you were going to watch it. So I go say, well, let me see if it's available to watch, which was a film that a couple of weeks ago, I didn't even know this movie existed. And it's called The Rider. And the only reason I knew about it was because the National Society of Film Critics awarded it their best film of 2018. And so that intrigued me.
That's how I knew it. Yeah, I just found it on some best of list and thought, wow, I want to see that.
So, I knew, Teal's going to watch it, so I better try to watch it too. So I find it. It was playing on Stars. So, I watch it, and then I find out you didn't even watch the movie yet. So I watched this film, and you don't even see it.
I will watch it by the next episode.
Oh, yeah. And so I don't want to get into it. I will just say 2 things. One, it's a Jimmy gripe. And here's the gripe. Stars. It is 2019, right? I'm a big boy. We're all adults here. And even if we aren't adults, I think by now we're all used to seeing films in their original format with the black bars on the top and the bottom.
People know to expect that now.
Yeah. So if you have a film like The Rider, which has just received the National Society of Film Critics top honor. If it's a film that's shot 2:3:5 to 1, why not show it in its original aspect ratio and not show it blown up to 1:8:5?
That is just terrible.
You're losing a good percentage of the movie on the
Yeah.
left and the right side. It's ridiculous.
That is just absurd.
I really wasn't sure I was going to watch this thing. So I thought I'll watch it for a few minutes because I don't know if I really want to be invested in a film that isn't, it's, you know.
Right, that's pan and scanned, yeah.
But I got to tell you, this movie was so great and so powerful that I watched the entire film, even at the 1:8:5 ratio.
Wow.
And I won't say anything more because I want you to see it.
Yeah.
But they're really, for me, this is an American film that really touches on a lot of aspects about America that we don't get to see very often in a film about America today.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's not about New York, it's not about
Right.
LA. and you know, but watching it and getting involved in this world that it felt like very realistic.
Wait, so it's
to
not
me.
about rich white people having problems?
It is, and what it reminded me is that, wow, when people throughout the heartland and other parts of America, they see American films, they probably get a very bizarre fantasy view of what they think.
Right. What America is like, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe in a strange way, this movie got me thinking about so many things as to why maybe superhero movies are so popular.
Oh, interesting.
It's a great escape, and if you see this kind of film and you see this story, and if you think that there are many facets of American life that are like this, that really on the fringe,
Right.
barely making it, that dreams and things are so hard to be able to realize that perhaps when you go to the theater, the only stories you want to see are the ultimate escapist where superheroes are defeating super enemies.
Right. And that's somehow comforting.
Yeah, and so even though this movie is nothing about that,
Right.
I felt that kind of power from this story.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's another film that I saw.
No, I'm really looking forward to seeing it. We'll see if it gets any Oscar nom.
Yeah, next week, and if we're on the ball, we might do a post Oscar nominations show to discuss those, because not that we'll have seen even half of the movies
Right,
that are probably on these lists,
But we can still rant about it.
we can rant, and we can also say, hey, you know, I really want to check this film out.
Yeah.
Well, briefly on that, I don't know if it's going to make the cut for the Oscars, but I did see a film that was another rave, Eighth Grade.
Oh, yes. Yep.
I do recommend it.
I've been wanting to see it. Yeah.
I think when you see it, even though I like the movie a lot, it's also a film that I have a lot of issues with that I think will be fun to
good.
discuss on the show. We should definitely talk about that when you've seen it so that we can, you know, pick it apart.
So here's what else I saw since the last show. Bad Times at the El Royale, Drew Goddard's movie.
I want to see that film.
I'm not going to say too much about it, but I'll say this. Without Jeff Bridges, there would be no movie. Jeff Bridges is great. In general, he's great. But this is a movie that really, I think the whole thing kind of hangs on this Jeff Bridges performance.
Without giving anything away, and especially it's where it's a film that's kind of, you know, Drew Goddard-y, where it's little surprises. Which, by the way, if people out there don't know the name Drew Goddard, he was responsible for directing a lot of Lost episodes.
Yes.
And he directed the film Cabin in the Woods.
Exactly.
I also think he wrote a couple screenplays of films.
I think he wrote Bad Times at the El Royale.
Okay, so writer and director Drew Goddard. But did you recommend the film?
Well, it's really long.
Okay, long times at the El Royale.
Yeah, long times at the El Royale. It is too long.
Well, again, another gripe is that it seems like the trend today in theatrical films is that it's got to be at least 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yep, and that's about what this film is. Okay, here's my criticism of this movie, because I think you are going to watch it, but I'm not recommending it highly. My big problem with it is it's not about anything.
Well, it's about bad times at the El Royale.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, but it's just kind of plot machinations without any theme.
So it's kind of like a big old circle jerk.
Yes.
It's just to get you off on some style. But that's the thing is, right?
It's got lots of style. It's got fun plot twists. The performances are good. it's highly watchable. But at the end of it, I was like, what is this movie even about? Does it have any kind of theme at all? I could not figure out what it was about.
That's kind of what it appeals to me, is that there are these movies that they're not going to be great. Maybe they're just the B movies of today.
Yeah.
I wasn't passionate enough to try to get out there to see it in the theater, but I definitely want to check it out because I kind of like movies like that.
Yes. Oh, I think it's got some good stuff in it. I enjoyed watching it. It was just too long and not about anything. But
and it reminded me of another movie that I also have not seen, but I think you mentioned in passing that you did, which is the Hotel Artemis.
Yes. Yes.
Was it similar in just sort of that jizz whiz, not really about anything?
Completely different.
Really? But wasn't it more still a film or style over substance?
Hotel Artemis is a little less stylish.
And you didn't like that one either?
It was okay. You
did make it through the whole thing, though.
I didn't make it through the whole thing. I will finish it, but I haven't yet. Let's see. I saw a movie called Jonathan, which is a super low budget movie with this guy Ansel Elgort, who was in
this guy Ansel Elgort. You mean the Baby Driver?
Yeah, the Baby Driver, and he was also in that Fault in Our Stars movie. And he's really good. And it's a super low budget movie. He gives a great performance, and it's a really nice little movie. It kind of has a sci-fi type premise. It's two characters in one body, and they switch back and forth. And I was impressed with it because the screenplay, like if you took that premise, two characters in one body, and you had a brainstorming session on all the different things you could do with it, this script does them. And it's great. It's like it keeps, you think, okay, this is what they're exploring with this part of it right now. And then it switches it up and it goes into another sort of take on this situation. So it's a really good script, super low budget movie. The direction is competent and pretty good for a low budget movie, and so I sort of recommend this movie as
sort of.
Yeah, I sort of recommend it. It was just I went in blind, and it was way better than I expected. I thought, I'll just watch 10 minutes of this, and I got sucked in.
Yeah, I mean, I got to give you some credit. Is I hadn't heard about it, and then I had to look it up really briefly on IMDb, and it said that it came out supposedly somewhere in November. I probably didn't play around my theater, but I added it to my watch list, and I want to check it out. I watched the trailer after that, and it's definitely up my wife's alley and my alley.
Yes, your wife will like this movie.
That's why we're doing this show, folks, is that I think that there are a lot of weird movies out there that you or I see, and we want to tell people about them. So, again, I don't even know how you hear about these films, and maybe you can talk just briefly about how you come across this stuff.
Yeah, because there's one more on my list that I saw called The Guilty, which came out this year. It's from Denmark. It's a Danish film. And this is a great movie about a guy sitting at a desk.
That's just not selling it. What is up with you, man?
I don't know. Okay, so this movie, The Guilty, I recommend it. I'm a big bottle movie fan. I love bottle movie. I'll just give you the premise of this movie. It's about a cop who's suspended, and so he's answering emergency calls.
Okay.
So he's sitting at a desk answering emergency calls, and he gets involved in a kidnapping and is talking to all these different people. He's talking to the dispatcher. He's trying to get a car to go out and find where the kidnapper is. And so it's this thriller that's basically just this guy on the phone.
Well, that actually sounds interesting. And it literally, does it go in any other location? It just stays with him the whole time?
It stays with him the entire time.
Well, that really is a bottle movie.
It really is a bottle movie, but it's incredibly effective and really tense. His performance is great. Yeah, so it's a great little thriller, and I recommend it. All
right, now how did you hear about this?
Okay, so here is my secret.
Okay.
It's not much of a secret, but I like watching movies blind, or with as little knowledge as possible ahead of time.
This is a segment I'm going to call Teal Thinks He's Better Than You Are.
Yes, and it's true, I do. It's very easy to be aware of Black Panther, right? The big movies that are...
What movie?
Yeah, exactly. Mary Poppins.
What?
The big movies that are coming out are really easy to be aware of and keep track of. And I like to know as little as possible before I see a movie. So I don't watch a lot of trailers. I don't follow a lot of movie websites and stuff. But what I do follow is Metacritic.
Okay.
And so I just go through Metacritic every week or two. And anything that scores over, say, 75 or 80, I'll click on and say, okay, what's this about? And usually I'll read just like so this is how I found The Guilt.
You read the byline.
I read the byline, and then I add the movie to my list, and then when it comes around, I'll watch it. And so that's how I found The Guilty, is it has an 83 on Metacritic. And so I just clicked on it, and thought I'll watch that, and it's great. It's a little 85-minute movie. And so that's a lot of my movie watching, and I don't read the reviews. I just see that it got a high score on Metacritic, and that's enough for me to watch it. And then after I watch it, I'll go back and read the reviews and watch trailers and stuff like that.
I am going to spoil every movie I've ever seen for you, just to mess with your whole. No.
Well, here's the thing. I don't mind. It's not a matter of principle. Like, I'm not trying to not know anything about these movies. If information comes in, that's fine. I don't really care if a movie gets spoiled or I know but this is sort of just a habit I'm in of how I find stuff, because I don't read a lot of movie websites. So I find stuff basically through Metacritic. That's how I found the Jonathan movie.
Well, I mean, I do have to hand it to you that it is great, because then you tell me about some movies and then I watch them. I mean,
yeah.
I will watch trailers. I do have an issue when trailers show too much of what's going to happen.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like I've been burned. Trailers have gone downhill, and I feel like I've been burned by them too many times recently.
But you know what, in fairness, sometimes I'll see the trailer like when it first comes out, and then I try never to watch it again.
Yes.
And honestly, by the time the movie does come out, or I see it, because a lot of times I can't see it till it's streaming or something, I have completely forgotten anything I've seen in the trailer.
Yeah. Yeah, you keep up a little bit more than I do on what's going on.
But I try to do what you do, is like I try to get the essence of what's happening.
Yes.
And then I don't want to know too many of the details, because I do like to experience a film pretty blind as well.
Yeah, exactly. And and so, yeah, that's how I do it blind, basically, is through Metacritic. And so I just add stuff to my list as I go through there. And, then when it comes around, I take a look at it. And yeah, I mean, I never would have found this Guilty movie, and it's great. I really, I love bottle movies. So
now this Guilty film,
yeah.
like, is it something that a normal person can actually find, or is it only like somebody cool like you with like your various methods of seeing things, which I don't even know, or could I actually see it? Like, is it on Netflix? Is it on Amazon, or no?
Well, no.
Okay. That's all. So that's the problem. Well, that's my problem with you, is you tell me about movies that I have no way that I can see.
You can rent it on Amazon.
Okay. Well, I don't spend the money to rent these films, but it is true that there are a lot of people that will. So listen out there. If you're intrigued by a guy sitting at a desk from Denmark, you can rent it.
Yeah. But I would recommend waiting. It will show up for free streaming, I bet. But right now, yes, it's rentable from Amazon, and it's also in theaters right now.
It is?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Let's caveat that. Probably only in a big market like Boston or LA or whatever, because it's not going to find its way to where I am.
No, definitely not.
But I did see a bottle movie that it's not officially a bottle movie. It's primarily in one location, but there are several others that kind of happen. They go out of the location in the film, and I never ever would have watched this movie. It just would not have appealed to me based on what I saw from the poster. But the New York Film Critics, they awarded their Best Actress award this year to Regina Hall.
Yeah.
For her performance in a movie called Support the Girls. And it was this like low budget film that, maybe was out in a week in theaters in LA and New York earlier this year. And it's about a woman who is managing a Hooters-like restaurant.
Okay.
And it takes place on one, kind of crazy day. So It was on Hulu, and I watched like 5 minutes of it. And in 5 minutes, I said, oh, you know what? This is interesting enough that I think my wife would want to watch it.
Right.
So over a series of days in the past week, we watched this because it was sort of more of a light comedy. You didn't have to spend too much time paying attention. And it's a 90-minute film. The first half of this film was really, really good. And I could say, all right, maybe the New York Film Critics were onto something. The second half of this movie is so terrible. It goes downhill so fast that it's actually not, it really basically comes down to not even being a good movie. And it's a real head scratcher because it's not that Regina Hall's performance is bad.
Right.
She's pretty good. However, when a movie is so bad, so filled with cliches, a little confusion, it just doesn't know what it wants to do. It becomes a bad movie.
Yeah, wow.
I can't believe that the New York Film Critics would like this film enough that they could give her over some of the other great acting performances that I've seen this year.
Right.
So that becomes a head scratcher because I would actually tell people to stay away from this film.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes these critically acclaimed films can be divisive.
Yeah, but this isn't even a film that normally critics would like. This is like the most dismissible film.
Wow. So it's just for her performance that it's getting interesting.
Yeah, but the problem is in the second half, her performance doesn't really hold, because of what her character, it becomes so bad. I just don't see anything in this film that was so glowing that you would award it.
Now, is this available somewhere? Where'd you see this?
I saw it on Hulu.
Oh, it's on Hulu. Okay.
It's on Hulu, and it's probably you can rent it on some of the other things like Amazon Prime or whatever. But we're still in the midst of a free trial for Hulu that we just basically haven't shut off yet. That's how they get you.
Exactly. Oh, that is how they get you.
Yeah, I mean Hulu does not have a lot of great films, but they also have again they seem to get a bag of films that normally wouldn't ever dent the theater. I saw this really weird movie that I just can't think of the name of, but it has Dakota Fanning, and she plays an autistic girl who's living in a group home.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And she writes a script for a Star Trek thing. You know what? I did make it through the whole film, but it literally has every possible single cliche you could ever imagine a road movie having.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense because all these bad things have to happen for the story to even continue.
Right. Okay.
And it's so ridiculous. But then you'll see this film, The Rider, and there's nothing. I'm not giving away anything other than there's a character in this film who is mildly autistic, and it's played by a real person who has mild autism. And when you see a real person with autism who's high functioning, and then you see a fake movie with an actress pretending, it's really bad. So no offense to Dakota Fanning. She was enjoyable, but it was really not a good movie.
Interesting.
So here's what's funny is that now we're way into this episode.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten to the meat of what you and I think we're going to discuss, but I'm going to throw out a film that you have been talking about.
Yes.
We talked about it a lot last week when we were discussing Hereditary. It is this film called The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Yes, exactly.
By our good old Greek pal,
Yorgos
Lanthimos, who I've now seen 3 of his films.
Yeah, let's see. The Favorite, Killing of a Sacred Deer, and what's the...
And The Lobster.
And The Lobster, that's right. Okay.
Yes. And I'm now my wife and I are now both really hooked on Yorgos, and we're dying to see Dogtooth and The Alps, which actually look as disturbing, if not more disturbing.
And The Alps is on Prime, I think.
It is, so we're going to watch that. Here are a couple things. It is a very disturbing film, as you mentioned.
Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to say, I went into this with very little knowledge, as usual, and this movie got under my skin. and I mean that, it bothered me. The kid's performance is really disturbing to me. Where the movie goes, there's this kind of underlying sense of darkness and evil in kind of every scene that just it's a mood that kind of crept into me and took me over while I was watching this movie. Anyhow, what do you think?
I will agree, but I was a couple of picadillos I have. And it's only because of your own critique of Hereditary.
Yeah.
Now, you got on Hereditary for this, what you called artificial...
Heartbeat?
Yes, where they were making scenes more intense that otherwise wouldn't be without that music.
Exactly.
But I will argue that Killing Deer does almost the exact same thing. He uses a different sound, but there are scenes which would not otherwise be intense other than the menacing sort of kettle drum that he's got going in the background.
I think that's absolutely right. And it does feel a little artificial at times. It feels a little manipulative.
But I think where I kind of agreed on Hereditary, but for a different reason, is that I think it wasn't so much that he was putting music to artificially ratchet up the tension, is that the choice of music in Hereditary is bad, whereas the music in The Killing of the Sacred Deer is more effective.
Yes.
He's setting up an overall mood. Now, you mentioned the kid's performance.
Yeah.
Now, this is kind of interesting. It was just, and this was an observation my wife picked up on. It did take us out of the movie a little bit, I got to be honest. So is this kind of fascinating. I think you'll be a little bit blown away when I tell you this. We're sitting there early on watching this, and the kid's, I mean, he's just weird, right?
He's creepy.
He's got this kind of weird voice and everything. And so when he's watching, we're watching it, and there's scenes early on when he's talking with Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
You know, it takes place in America, in actually Ohio. And Colin Farrell, he's a doctor, but he actually is playing with his own accent.
Yes.
And yet he's married to Nicole Kidman, an Australian. She is playing with an American accent.
Yes.
And he has a daughter who's American, who's actually British in real life. And that only the kid's son is really an American actor. Now, this kid who he keeps hanging out with on the side, it takes a while for you to understand what their connection is.
Yeah.
My wife says, is this kid an American actor? Because he sounds like he's from Ireland. So lo and behold, the kid is Irish.
Wow.
The kid's accent was going in and out when he talked to Colin Farrell.
Wow.
Because Colin Farrell was not playing with an American accent, which he frequently does. So when an Irish kid is talking to someone who's Irish, he had a very hard time maintaining his American accent.
Oh, wow.
Nicole Kidman was having a hard time keeping her American accent up when she was here, when she was talking with Colin Farrell, because he was in that more European dialogue. And so it became a little unnatural, which normally would really bother the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Because the film is weird and a little unnatural and off kilter, it kind of works.
Yeah, it didn't bother. I mean, I can, now that you mention it, I can see. Oh yeah, that is a little gripe. But yeah, it didn't bother me while I was watching it.
But now I have a little bit more experience than you, because you did not see The Lobster in the last week, right?
Nope. Oh, I'm going to see all the Yorgos movies. You
need to get almost 5 films of a director under your belt to really understand what is the director about.
Right.
And now I've seen his most recent 3, and why I think he's getting better and better is The Lobster, his first American film.
Yeah.
It's American language.
Right.
It's pretty out there.
His first English language film.
I haven't seen his former ones in from Greece, but Killing of a Sacred Deer kind of takes a step back more into the territory he's comfortable with, which is making people uncomfortable.
Yes.
Not that The Lobster is not an uncomfortable experience, but then The Favorite. So here's where you're starting to see a master, a craftsman at work, because some of the camera moves and the way he's filming Killing of a Sacred Deer, it almost feels like he's starting to experiment with something that he wasn't 100% successful at.
Yeah.
What it is, again, with a lot of these wide-angle shots, some fisheye. Mm-hmm. Now, the fisheye, especially
the hospital hallway scene.
He's using the fisheye, and then he's like using a Steadicam, I think, in an interesting way, pulling back really fast.
Yes.
The problem I have there was, and again, it's probably more with the cinematographer, was there was a lot of vignetting to the fisheye.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
And
I agree, yeah.
You sometimes are very cognizant of the camera moves, but when I see something like that, that to me looked like a mistake.
Right.
And that I think he was fine with because that's just what he wanted to have done. And that was the way the effect was going to look. It kind of takes you out saying, oh, I see a movie's being filmed.
Right. It's like seeing not quite as bad, but it shows you that, it takes you out of the movie a little bit. It breaks immersion.
But at the same time, right, I don't think he minds so much that when you're watching Killing of a Sacred Deer, it's part of that, unsettling, but it's also calming in that it's just a movie.
Right.
And what he does to me, anyway, when I'm watching all this photography and I'm trying to figure out, because like it's become so deliberate that I'm saying, all right, he's doing this for a reason. And what I thought was interesting is I kind of felt like throughout the film, I was a voyeur. And that it's that almost these camera movements where we're like this extra person spying in almost that security camera kind of way.
Absolutely. But a security camera or like a spirit or something, like some ethereal creature kind of looking in on sort of the anthropological details of a family falling apart.
Yes. And so I feel that there is the camera is almost purposely removed to a degree. And so that I thought was interesting because overall, between the sound use and the camera work, it did leave me with this very kind of, it was a creep fest of a film.
Yeah.
And yet there is a subtext to the movie that I really didn't understand, but there's a actual whole Greek mythology.
Yes. Yeah, I looked that up afterwards. Yeah.
What I think is great is from an American audience standpoint, there may be a whole subtext that we didn't even understand what's going on that he's going for, and yet it still is effective whether or not you get the subtext.
You don't need the subtext because he's telling it in such a way that's it's not dependent on outside knowledge. The performances, that amazing camera work, and the just creepy script.
Yeah. And with that camera work, and I don't really want to dwell on this too much, but when it comes to the favorite, this is where I think he stepped up his game. He has a different cinematographer than his normal cinematographer, which has shot all his other films. He takes this wide screen photography to a new and even more successful level.
Interesting.
And he's able to create an atmosphere and experience that he wants that I think he was starting to just toy around with in Killing of a Sacred Deer and is now kind of perfected. I don't think you want to continue doing it over and over again, but it's almost like these three films together are great sort of trilogy. Right. Now, one of the films that this Killing of a Sacred Deer reminded me of, and you know what, I did find it more successful and enjoyable, if that's kind of the term, than Hereditary. So I can understand why, having seen this film, you were not as thrilled with Hereditary because it didn't give you what you felt this film gave you.
Exactly.
But it did remind me, especially where the fact that there's a subtext to the movie that I picked up only slightly and then I read about afterwards, and yet I liked it a whole lot for many different reasons, was Darren Aronofsky's Mother.
Okay, let me talk about this for a second, because I just watched it last night.
On the big screen TV?
On the big screen TV. So again, this is a movie that is fairly well known. It didn't go completely under the radar. So I was aware of it when it came out. But I intentionally didn't read much about it. I knew it was polarizing. I knew there was an exclamation mark in the title. I knew Darren Aronofsky had directed. I knew who the cast was. And that's it. That's all I...
That is also, by the way, as much as I knew when I saw it in the theater.
Okay.
Anytime a movie elicits such strong reactions, either pro or con, I'm in.
Yes, exactly. It has to be seen, kind of. And going in blind, I think the less you know about this movie, the better. I knew that people had walked down, and so I'm nervous to talk about it too much because
I think we can talk about this film without really getting into the story.
Okay, this won't give anything away, but just on a personal level.
Okay, yes.
Just on a personal level, there are few things in this world I hate more than uninvited house guests.
Oh, no, I didn't even know that.
And so when this movie involves uninvited house guests,
it does.
In fact, I think that's kind of the premise.
Okay.
It was driving me crazy. Like, I just could not handle these people coming into the house. And so it was great in that sense. It pushed a button for me.
So did you like this film?
I think this is a great film.
Yes! Yes! And I'm going to tell you why, because I've been screaming for the rooftops all over people, is that to me, this is one of the top films of the last 10 years.
Yeah, I feel like I need to see it again, but it is great. I think you had told me, that was another thing I knew, is you had said it had gone off the rails a little bit in the third act.
It ratchets it up to 11.
It does, but I didn't think it went off the rails at all. In fact, so in the first half hour of this movie, I, in part my reaction to Uninvited House Guests, but I kind of decided what I wanted out of the movie and how I wanted it to end, without details. So not how I wanted it to end in a plot sense, but how I wanted it to end emotionally. And it gave me exactly what I wanted.
Oh yeah. I feel that this movie, he took himself to a place that you didn't think he could come back and pull it all together and give us a satisfying ending. And I loved the ending of the movie.
Yes, and I gotta say, the reason the ending works is because it's also the first 2 or 3 minutes of the movie.
Yes, let's not give anything more away on this, but you said something that this to me is why I love the film. I think you could go into this and there's a whole biblical aspect,
yes.
And it's actually very biblical.
Yeah.
That if you're a biblical scholar and you're following all that, that's it works really great for you. Or you could think it's very heavy-handed in that regard. But what I liked about the film is exactly what you said. See, I'm a big dream guy. I like movies that can actually take you into the experience of what a dream is.
Yeah.
And so the idea that you have this house and you're trying to make it perfect and you're trying to solve a task, and then people keep coming in and intruding. And going, I have dreams like this. So when I see a movie.
Yes, and I felt so protective of the house.
And the way her her performance is so great.
This movie convinced me that Jennifer Lawrence is a great actress.
Yeah, I know. I think, I'm not 100% certain, but I think the Razzies nominated for Worst Actress.
Really?
I think her performance is the best performance she's ever done.
I totally agree. I thought it was just absolutely stunning, her performance, because it got me to care about the house.
Yes, and that's, of course, that's the essence of the whole film.
Yeah.
But tell me, did you not also think, and again, I love this movie, and I know you do too, but this movie reminded me of the discreet charm of the bourgeoisie.
Yes, and I think... for several reasons. There's a sequence in the movie, basically. I don't know, it's more than a sequence, but but what it does, and it was so skillfully done, it was just incredible how the set and the costuming changes from shot to shot during this sequence, and it's a dreamlike sequence, and it sort of becomes so separated from reality that it moves completely into the realm of metaphor. It's so,
I don't know how, that's the thing is, I really do, I don't always like an Aronofsky movie, but I have to applaud the stuff he was able to pull off in this movie.
There's one sequence, or one scene where there's a group of people, and at the beginning of it, it kind of has this happy, upbeat feel, and the colors are brighter, and by the end of the sequence, and this is all within a minute. By the end of the sequence, the costuming has changed, the lighting has changed, and it all happened so subtly that you can't even really tell where the cuts were. At what point did the costuming change? It's done so subtly and so in such a dreamlike fashion. You in a dream, you turn around and something is completely different. A wall is moved. There's strange people there.
Yeah, and there's continuity, and yet at the same time, things are not making sense.
Exactly. There's
just like a dream.
Just like a dream. Yeah, and but the movie does that, but without it actually being a dream.
Yes.
Right. So you feel like there's real consequence to what's going on.
I didn't even interpret this movie as a dream. It's just that what worked for me is that same feeling that I get in a non-completion dream.
Exactly.
Where I can't carry out the objective because all of these things that are foreign and frustrating that are like maybe deep within my brain are coming out to challenge me.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, it features great on-film cinematography by Matthew Lebetique.
Okay, but just a note about the cinematography.
Okay.
We have been ranting a lot about movies that are all Steadicam and not very well thought out shots.
But not this movie.
So this movie is largely handheld, which is very different than Steadicam.
Yes.
Very different. And it's widescreen. And
it's shot on film.
And it's shot on film. And there is a shot in this movie that happens over and over and over again, which is basically the back of her head and neck and the top of her shoulders in the center of the screen. With you see her ears and then it's widescreen, right? So you see the edges of the frame moving around her, and the sound is coming from the edges. But it does this shot over and over again, and it's a really tense shot. Because it locks you into her point of view and you feel like there's things on the edges of the screen that are potentially threatening.
Which, by the way, when you saw this last night, did you watch it with headphones or with your sound system?
Headphones.
So I don't know how it stacks up with the headphones on.
Oh, pretty good.
Okay, because when I saw it in the theater, I felt that it wasn't the mix going wrong in the theater. I felt like there were sounds coming from the left and the right and behind that were all very intentional to add to that disorientation.
Well, like right in the beginning, there's a scene with her walking around the house, and there's a lot of creaking sounds.
Yes.
And they are coming from all over the place. Yeah. No, okay, so while we're talking about this movie, I don't think it gives too much away about the movie to say it takes place in a house.
Yeah. The house is a major character.
Right. But, okay, so we've also got Hereditary, which is largely in a house.
And I think I know where you're going with this. Right? Anyway, because I complained about this last week.
Yeah.
Hereditary, house. The house doesn't feel like a character. It feels like a movie set.
Exactly.
Whereas in Mother, it feels like a real place.
Yes. Then there was that movie I watched a couple of months ago called Haunter.
Which I haven't seen, and I do want to see that.
Which you haven't seen, that Vincenzo Natali film. That takes place in a house, and it's kind of this supernatural horror type thing. Bird Box. So I'm just sort of putting these all together in this house.
Triangle, which takes place on a boat.
Well, no, that doesn't really count. but in terms of these movies that are sort of limited to a house, Mother is just so far beyond. Oh man, I could spend like another hour on this movie. I want to watch it again.
I've seen it twice.
Okay.
And that was my concern, is a year later, I watch it at home without the big sound system with my wife. Does this film hold up? And to my delightful surprise, it not only held up, but my wife loved it. And she said something that I felt too, is that this feels like the kind of movie they don't make anymore. It feels like something from another time, like in the late 80s, early 90s. And I was like, yes.
Yeah. Well, the movie that I think it's most similar to
okay,
is Rosemary's Baby. I mean, not just thematically. There's some thematic similarities going on, but in terms of... Okay, so the title of the movie is Mother, and I was expecting it to be about motherhood in some way. But as I'm watching the movie, I'm really thinking, yeah, there's some of that going on, but what's really going on is this is a movie about marriage.
Yes.
Right? And about their relationship more than anything else. At least that's what it keeps coming back to in the first half of the movie anyway. I kept thinking, this is a movie about marriage. Okay, so Rosemary's Baby, yes, is about all the fears of pregnancy and everything, but it's really about their marriage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's the similarity I see, is that they're both movies about marriage, and that's what I thought was in fact really powerful about Mother, is that that's what it's about, and that I was not expecting that. I was expecting something. I guess I don't know what I was expecting, but I was expecting something less thematically rich and a little bit more shock oriented, based on the fact that I knew people had walked out of the theater. But the whole time I'm sitting there going, why would somebody walk out of the theater during this? I mean,
well,
there is.
I'll tell you why. And it's good. It's not about some things that happen at the end,
right,
which was too much for some people because some people are just lame. It's that this idea of the frustration, I call it frustration movies and sometimes unsettling, is that people, they want to have a plot. They want to have a story. And most people would start to watch this film and they're waiting for something to happen, and that it keeps getting interrupted just the way her character does, where you can't get the satisfaction. And that is too frustrating for people, and they go, I don't have time to waste in this movie, and they want out. Because, you know, my whole game is that if all I saw were movies like Mother, well, I would hate them.
Right.
Because that would be it. But just like I'll go to a superhero movie like everybody else, but if that's all I'm getting, I will hate them. I got to have a variety. I want to be challenged at times when I see a film. So I don't want every single movie to challenge me.
Right.
But I want to know that some of those exist.
Exactly. And Mother challenges you in a great way, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me to put a movie like that has to be really one of my best films of a year.
Yeah.
It's got to do more for me than just entertain. It's got to just really, it's got to make me feel something. And, you know, Mother put me a little on edge. It was exciting because I didn't know what was going to happen.
And the movie kind of doesn't know what's going to happen in a weird way. I mean, it's all meticulously well planned out, but it leaves you feeling unmoored. But at the same time, it has an incredibly emotionally satisfying ending. Like, all that frustration to me it was utilized well by the director.
It's certainly not a drama. It's not a thriller. It's not a horror movie, yet it combines all of these elements. It's also even funny. There's definitely some humor to it, too.
There's definitely some humor in it, yeah.
But when I thought of these films like Hereditary, you know, I'm hoping that people see Hereditary, and if you're a big horror buff, you'll love it, right? That's great. But there's a reason why when you and I pick apart a film like Hereditary, it's because we see these films like
all the time,
Killing of a Sacred Deer, but we also see movies like Mother, and that they're covering ground in a whole higher level.
Yeah, and this is my thing about Hereditary. It didn't get under my skin.
No, I mean, you know, it's funny, having heard back the episode when I was putting it together to get it out, I realized that you really wanted to talk about a scene in Hereditary, and I steered you away from it.
Yes.
But you know, and again, it's funny. I was kind of glad because I was like, well, I don't want to give away things, but there is something that happens that kind of kicks off the, you know. There's always a scene in a movie, and it's usually, you had thought it was 20 minutes in, because that's usually when that scene is supposed to come into films, but this came a little later, maybe too late for me, it was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's basically an event happens that kicks off the remainder of the film. It's clumsy in the way that it should have happened a little earlier and quicker.
It should have happened earlier. It's also poorly executed.
You thought so. I didn't think so. I found it effective because, again, it was so jarring, and then what came next was done in a way that isn't usually done that way. Again, you had talked about it with sort of this off-screen reaction.
Oh, I thought that was incredibly effective.
We're so shocked by something we just saw.
I wasn't shocked by it. I just thought it was silly.
Well, you know, I can't. I'm a little different. I was shocked because, you know, there was somebody. She's having a.
Okay, I'm giving this away.
Here we go.
Okay, so after this incredibly well done, incredibly effective off-screen reaction that Toni Collette has to the daughter's death, it cuts to a shot of a severed head crawling with ants.
That's the part that bothered you?
Yes.
But why? You just didn't feel they needed to show that?
No, I thought that it was an incredibly effective emotional moment, and that was a shock, was done for shock value, and that it stepped on the moment. It stepped on the subtlety of that moment. And it ruined my emotional reaction because the severed head was just silly.
So here's a couple things. There is a theme going with severed heads in the film that, you know what, a more astute film goer than I will make the connection of what were these severed heads all about. I have to say I'm not 100% sure, and I'm thinking that that's a fault of the director, that he clearly had intentions, but I don't feel he was successful in everything he did. So this one character, she's having an attack because she's allergic to nuts, right?
Yeah.
So she starts having this attack, and this older brother's trying to get her home instead of taking her to the hospital, right? Like in a normal movie.
It was so silly to me.
So she's freaking out, but then she opens the window and sticks her head out to get air. But and all of a sudden, I was like, my stomach just leapt as that her head gets taken off.
Well, it's even sillier than that. He swerves to avoid a deer at exactly the moment that they're passing a telephone pole.
A sacred deer? I'm just kidding.
I wish the movie had that much going for it, that the deer was actually a meaningful symbol instead of just a convenience to take the kid's head off.
I had a little bit different reaction because
I hated this movie. I hate this movie.
So now he hates Hereditary.
I hate Hereditary.
I did not hate Hereditary. What I'm saying is that you think this movie is about Toni Collette, right? And it leads you to believe for 20 minutes, and then suddenly it goes off, and then this thing happens, and suddenly the focus shifts to the older brother for a while, and I think that's where it gets off track. Again, he's got a point to all this, but he keeps everything in the dark to kind of come with a big reveal, and that's a problem, whereas...
And the reveal is really clumsy and poorly handled.
Well, it could have been handled differently. And then, of course, there's a connection to Rosemary's Baby in this one. But in Killing of a Sacred Deer, the reveal of the story happens at, I think, a better pace. Mm-hmm. When the intentions of Killing of a Sacred Deer become very clear, it happens in a very abrupt way. And it's actually shocking in the matter-of-factness that the one character says it.
Exactly. Yep.
It's almost like, what? You know, so I understand why you were bringing that in.
I'm just saying, if you're thinking of watching Hereditary, watch Killing of a Sacred Deer, watch Mother. Watch those first. They're better movies.
They are way better films, but I also recognize that there are just some horror fans. They're not going to want to. They're not going to get what we got out of Mother, and they're not going to get what we got out of Killing of a Sacred Deer. They will get whatever they're going to get out of Hereditary.
I guess so.
Maybe those people aren't going to listen to our podcast.
Well, I have a friend who's really into horror movies, and he doesn't like Hereditary, and his reason for not liking it is that the characters have no volition. They're just subject to the whims of the writer, and they're just pushed around. And the characters don't have any agency. They don't get to make any decisions on their own.
And yet, we still can agree that Toni Collette's performance is still outstanding.
Outstanding. The movie is worth it, really, I think, for that performance. I think the performance is that good that that the movie is almost worth it for that.
I agree. Okay, so you know what? We actually had a whole other thing that this was supposed to lead into, but guess what? We're way over time because this just seems to be our theme now, and I'm going to have to cut this episode short, but I think that, maybe we will pick up some of that on our next episode. This could lead into a whole great discussion over films that are difficult to watch.
Yes.
Films that are purposely designed to unsettle you, whether it's for historical reasons or it's just whatever,
right.
But we have a difficult time watching them, and I want to explore that, but I think we're going to have to wait for another episode.
We'll get to it next time, and I think on the next show, I'm just going to warn you right now.
Okay.
We have kind of a rule on the show, which is that we don't talk about Marvel movies.
Well, no, that's your rule.
It is my rule, but I think that if Black Panther gets nominated for Best Picture, I'm going to break my rule. So I'm warning you ahead of time that may be coming up on a future show.
Well, I think that, at this point, we just disclose, I'm not, this is not an anti-comic book superhero movie show. It's just that there are probably 1,000 other shows that talk
exactly
ad nauseum about that, and we don't need to be that show. We want to tell you about a guy from Denmark who sits at a desk.
You got to see this movie.
Fields Calls.
You got to.
I know now. I want to see it. You've got me hooked. It's just I got to wait till I can actually see the film, and I'm not going to pay money to rent. Like, it's funny. I will pay money to see things. Like, for instance, I'm really. If it wasn't for the fact that it's going to snow all weekend and I can't get there, I was going to go driving to Massachusetts to Boston to see Roma in 70 millimeter, even though I saw it on Netflix, because damn it, I feel like it's worth it to see it up on the big screen in 70 millimeter. I'll do that, but I won't pay $3 or $4 to rent a movie online. I just won't do it.
Well, keep your eye out for The Guilty. It's really good.
Yeah, well, I'm going to add it to my queue. That way, like I add things to Amazon,
Right.
and that way when the little Prime thing pops up, I know, hey, I can watch this now. Yeah. So anyways,
Until next time.
happy shutdown, everybody. I'm sure that by the next time we do this next episode, the shutdown will still be there.
Oh, the shutdown's not going away, and neither is our podcast.
Listen, if you like the show and you know people who might like it, you got to tell them about it. You got to share it because, we've now got the show. It is on Google Play. It's on TuneIn. It's on iTunes. It's on Podbean. Anywhere that you might find a podcast, we are findable. So, get somebody to watch it or not watch it, listen to it. I'll cut that out.
Tell your friends.
Subscribe, all those things. Yeah, tell people. Otherwise, we'll keep making the show. It's just no one will listen to the show.
Yeah. Well, we'll listen to it, I guess.
People are having fun with the things I post on Instagram. Jim and Teal on Instagram. It's fun little addendum to the podcast.
Okay.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.